Well, hello, it is March already. This video would have been up a little sooner, but we ran into some technical difficulties beyond our control, including a little bit of a health scare here and there. Nothing serious, just a little head cold. So, they say better late than never. So I hope you enjoy this video about using a grid. Little dark eyes out. All right, we are in March and we are talking about the grid. I use a grid every time I am using a commissioned portrait. It's my personal insurance that when someone says, can you draw me or whatever, I tell them straight away that, hey, I will do it. And I tell them that I use this grid system. And it's basically my insurance that when the picture is done, someone says to me, hey, I don't look like that. And I tell them this is about as close as you can get to actually tracing a picture without actually tracing a picture. So I always use this as my insurance. I can draw freehand, but when it's a commission, I use a grid. But there's some things about this grid that are amazing, and there are also some things that I think you should know about this grid before you continue. So let's get started. What should I know about the grid? The first thing you should know is that as an artist, we deal with shapes every single day. Not only in drawing, but also with using this grid. And there are three basic formats that an artist uses. There's the portrait format, which we'll just put a P for portrait. There is the landscape portrait, landscape format. And there is, of course, the square format. You might even see these on your computer. If you go to print something, they will ask you, do you want a portrait format, a landscape format, or if you want this in square. Now, this is a very important thing to know. Why is this important to know when using a grid? Well, the reason why this is important to know is because these shapes, surprise, surprise, will not fit in one another. You might think, I think she's lost it a bit, but I'll tell you what I mean. Do you remember that old toy that you usually see in doctor's offices? It was a hexagon type shape of a toy as such, and it had a purpose. Everything in life has a purpose, you and me included. So there would be a square hole in there and a circle hole here, and then a triangle here, and then there'd be a star shape here, and then there would be, I don't know, a love shape here, and this was a hole. You might recognize this toy. And when you look at this toy here, it doesn't make sense at the moment why I'm talking about this in a grid, but it will in a minute. And next to that toy, there will be all these shaped blocks. Start to remember the toy now, and it would have all these series of shapes. And the deal was that the child, okay, had to get the right block into the right hole shape. So it was teaching children to identify shapes. Now you might think, well, I get that, I know that, why are you teaching me that? Well, it's amazing to me how many people try to fit a wrong format into a sized grid. So let me show you what I mean. With the portrait format, people try and fit a square-shaped photograph into a portrait, and it will not fit. Likewise, they'll try and fit a portrait format into a landscape format, and it won't fit. And of course, vice versa. Now, if you're using a grid, let's just say that the second square here was the photo, so we'll put a P for all of those, okay? And this was your paper, okay? We have a huge problem now because the photo or the proportions will be distorted. Let me show you what I mean. Let's just say that you are drawing a picture of a person and it's a full-length picture. Well, that is a rectangular shape, but your square or your paper is a square shape. Now, the person is thinking that they are going to look like their best representation of themselves. But if you try and fit a rectangle grid as such, because this is the grid that we'll be using, okay, if you try and fit this shape into that shape, this is what you will have. So now you have a person who is in a rectangular grid, and because you used a square grid, the proportions will be off, making the person look wider than they are. So here we have an angry client yelling at the artist saying, "What's the big idea? I don't look like that." And the artist is saying, "I don't understand it. I used a grid." You have to make sure that the shapes fit in the right place. If they don't, you're going to have a hilariously and horrible time trying to explain. I mean, you'll laugh about it later, but you won't be laughing at the time. And as you can see, our artist friend doesn't look too happy with the picture that he spent hours on, not realizing that the proportions were wrong because a square and a rectangle will not fit. All right, so as I was saying about the shapes not fitting and so forth, I just also want to make mention that I use the square format a lot. The other format that I use the next would probably be the what we call the portrait format, but I don't usually use that for portraits. I usually use the square for portraits, and I use the portrait for ballet dancers. Very rarely do I use the landscape format because I am not a landscape painter, but I will use it if I'm doing something like a seascape or whatnot. Now we know now that the shapes as such will not fit. If this is a photo, okay, so go photo, and this square here is the paper, okay, we know that these two will not fit. So we need if we have a photo that is a portrait format, it needs to go, the paper needs to fit the same shape. Same with the square and the same with the rectangle. Now you go, well, yeah, you've already touched on that, Kimberly. Well, that's true, I have, but I want to also point out something about size. The great thing about this grid, just fix that up. The great thing about this grid is it doesn't matter how big or how small you want your painting to be, or how small or how big your photo is, it will fit directly into this shape if it's the same shape. So if I have a square headshot for a portrait, and I have a really tiny photo with my grid on it, and I have my paper with my grid on it, okay, it'll transfer to that size and the proportions will be accurate. And the same goes for the landscape as well as the portrait format. Okay, it doesn't matter what size you have, as long as the shapes match up, you are home and hosed to create an accurate looking drawing. So let's look at how we do that with a grid. All right, so we have, this is my good piece of paper, this is my art paper, and due to my last YouTube video, a person seen a photograph that I'd taken, which was about tracing paper, which I'm about to use that technique in a minute, and they said, "Kimberly, I really love that drawing, that photograph you took. I would like a drawing of that." And I said, "Sure." And I said, "But I was going to use it for my grid YouTube video." And they said they don't mind. So you are actually going to watch me create a painting, a commission. So here's the paper, and I've already cut it out to the format I wanted, remembering that a square will not fit a rectangle. And although not a portrait, this is the picture that they were referring to. And it is in a portrait format. If you see that it is in an upright rectangular shape. And so I cut the paper to that upright rectangular shape. Now, I don't normally draw my grid with a red pen, but in this case I decided that I was going to do that for the demonstration purpose, so that you might be able to see it just a little bit clearer. Might even go over a black pen with that, just so that you can see. So we are going to get our ruler. I'm going to line the corners up, and the first mark that we are going to make, if you remember from my how to make a composition finder video, you will know that the first mark that we are making is going to be that times table mark. The pencil that I'm using, by the way, is a 6B pencil, just in case you're... Something soft that I can erase later is always a good idea. The next one is going to be the addition sign. Make sure that everything's nice and straight. We do not I said this when I was making a composition finder, and I'll say it again. We do not want a wonky grid because we'll create a wonky painting. This is not completely foolproof. You must always check everything twice. It's like the old carpenter's adage. They'd say measure twice, cut once. Or it's a bit that way when making a grid for artists. Okay, everything seems to be going right. The next shape we're going to make is a diamond shape, or the shape of value. So here we go, making sure that they line up on those points. I'm going to show you how to use this again with the composition finder again. Just turning that paper around, back to those angles yet again. I'm not pressing too hard, I'm pressing nice and soft, because that's the last thing you want to deal with. I must say, using this black cardboard is actually giving the paper a nice spongy feel when I draw, and I'm actually liking that a lot. So if you want to get some cardboard, just to get a nice soft feeling on your paper, you're more than welcome to do that. I recommend you try it, it feels good. Alright, didn't go, pencil gave out on me. There we go. Alright, now for the famous tic-tac-toe sign. Here we go, making sure that they line up at those points. And making sure that they line up at those points. Oh, I've lost my paper. It's alright. And here, making sure they line up again. Turn it around. And the very last line. Right here. Alright, so we have our grid on our paper. Okay? At any time, if you wanted to stop that, you can stop that. Now, from my previous video, I did a tracing paper showing you how to isolate value. I don't know if it actually went up because I had so much trouble with that video. But I did an outline of this photograph on tracing paper to show you how to isolate value. And I didn't think you could see the grid very well on here. So again, I got a thicker pen and I did the grid. And I'm showing you in that how we can isolate shape. Now, the next part about this whole issue here is that we are going to be now transferring our photo onto our paper. And the grid is going to help us to keep everything in line and shape. Okay, so that is what we are going to do. So let's get our tracing paper so that we don't get our oily hands on our nice art paper. And let's look. Now, the other thing that I love about this grid, and I didn't mention it, is that it helps you understand rule of thirds better than any other grid I've ever known. I'll show you what I mean by that. We have 1, 2, 3 on this side, and when I flip this image around, this grid, again on this landscape format, you have 1, 2, 3, and that helps you understand the rule of thirds in your perspective. Very, very helpful. But this video is not about perspective, so we'll talk about that one on a later date. Now, with this grid, you can start anywhere you please. And I might start with the middle line, because if I look here on this picture, and I'll hold it up a little bit, right down that middle line, right here, I can see about here that the leaf comes across, cuts a little bit into that triangle, and goes up. So let's have a look. And the shape sort of comes out like this. And as it approaches the top, it just cuts across there a little bit. Tiny smidgen. When we come over to this triangle, that is almost completely covered in the leaf shape, except for a little bit here into the next triangle. And I think you start to see, hopefully, where I'm coming with this. And then we come across. And then it cuts across this shape, this outline here. Right across here, it cuts across these two triangles here. Alright, now this is not cheating in art, okay? I want to make that very clear, is that there is no such thing as cheating in art. Whatever helps you get your drawing across in the most best and effective way is going to help you. So, use it. I just find that for me, this has been one of the best safety nets I've ever used when using a commission. And if ever you're thinking about becoming a commission artist, I highly recommend that you try that grid. Now already I can see, just by doing that this should actually be a little bit more closer here. Isn't that amazing? See, it's already doing its job. It's already helped correcting me. And it's helping me visualize. So I'll just get my rubber. This rubber is a Prismacolor rubber. It's called the Magic Rub. And I love it because I can be as hard with it as I want to be when removing a grid or fixing up a mistake like I just did then. And seriously, the paper, it will not damage the paper. I find that possibly the most beneficial thing. Just get a brush. And so how far does that come down? Cuts across these two triangles here. It's always good, I know it sounds funny, to talk to yourself when you're drawing. I do a lot. My mum always says to me, "Who are you talking to, Kimberly?" So I'm just talking to myself when I draw, because I find that's a very good habit to have. It's not good when you're out in public though. People think you're a bit funny, but when you are drawing, you're constantly talking to yourself in your mind anyway. You're always saying to yourself, does that match up here? Does that look right here? And it's just amazing how you can correct yourself just by drawing. I mean, it's just amazing. Just by looking at your art and just saying to yourself, you know, is that right? Is that wrong? Did that match? Is it okay? You know, how does that look? All right. Well, I'm going to continue on with this, and when it is finished, and I have finished the drawing, I'm going to rub out the grid, and the next thing will be to tone in the value. So we'll see you when I'm finished. Bye. All right. Well, I told you that wouldn't take long. So now the only thing left is to rub out the grid. Now the same way I drew the grid is usually the same way I'll rub out the grid. What I mean by that is that when I get some paper here, hang on a second. Just move that out of the way so I don't get it dirty. When I drew the grid, as I pointed out, I do the times table sign, and I do this sign, then the diamond sign, and then the tic-tac-toe sign as such. Now, I will start to rub out, starting to rub out that sign first, then this one, and of course, last but not least, I will go this way, then this way. And that way I can keep track. So what happens is because when you draw a line, you've got lines going everywhere, depending on what it is that you've drawn. And you're going to have to make sure that you're rubbing out the right line. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start rubbing from corner to corner, very gently, and I will brush away the excess of the rubber with this brush. So I'll show you what I mean. From corner to corner, like so. I also don't usually do this, but I started drawing in some tonal value shape. I don't usually do that. I usually just draw the outline. But in this case, I thought, what the heck, it was so much fun and it was so quick, so didn't want the drawing to end. I'm rubbing like that so that nothing skips over the paper. And there you go. And I will rub out the rest of the grid and I will show it to you later. Alright, there she is. She has been transferred onto art paper by using the grid method. Now, as you can see, I'll use this bigger picture here that doesn't have a grid on it. You might think that I accidentally left part of the grid on, which I actually didn't. That's just part of the value tone. You can see it right across along in there. But this is a really effective way to draw accurately. And if you're not used to drawing and you'd like to learn how to draw, I highly recommend using the grid method. It's a great way to learn how to draw freehand, and it's a great way to transfer your image straight away onto good paper without having to trace. I'm not a fan of tracing. At the very least, it's not exactly my favorite method. However, the grid method to gain accuracy, honestly, I couldn't go past it. I think it's one of the best methods out there in art. So in the next thing that you're about to see, we're going to just quickly go over how I use that with my composition finder. All right, hope you enjoy. Can't wait to put value on this. Okay, so for those of you who remember the composition finder, we're still talking about the grid, but for those of, as I said, for those of you who remember the composition finder, I have my tracings, I have my cutouts, and they are there in what I would say is a pretty good idea for a composition. And I'm going to put my grid on top, but instead of using a pencil, I'm using string, just like I showed you before. And I'll show you how I use it this way, like so. And now that you have your composition and you have your grid and you have everything all done up and you've drawn on your plastic bit as I've already done here, then you can take this image, take a photo on your Canon camera or your iPhone or whatever it is you happen to have, put it on your computer, print it, and just like I showed you, and I've already named it before class starts, just like I've shown you with the picture of the plant, you can use that grid to identify shapes to draw your or transfer your image onto good art paper. And just for the fun of it, I thought I'd show you that I've already gridded this up and put this on good art paper, and all that's left for me to do is to block in the value, add color, add some tone. If I want to add something more, I can, but this is basically this. Done with the composition finder, using the grid, same way I used a pencil, except with the pencil instead I used string. So there it is. That is how you use a grid. I hope you enjoy that. I hope you use it. I hope it is a benefit to your artwork, and I can't wait to see what you come up with. See you in the next one. Okay, I thought that I would just briefly mention the rule of thirds as I did previously. The rule of thirds is a very important thing for both, both for photography and for artists. Now, what is the rule of thirds, you may ask? Does it really matter? Yes, it does. Both in photography and in art, okay, everybody has to use the rule of thirds, whether you're doing an indoor painting or an outdoor painting. Okay, both of those rule of thirds apply to both of those things, and I'll explain in a minute. Okay, let's just use landscape, for example. We will use this as our horizon line, okay, and we will use a box like such. That horizon line is directly in the middle and a very uninteresting composition. However, if we use the rule of thirds to our advantage, now remember that grid that I showed you, I made a little mark either this way and this way, because that grid goes from corner to corner, and it goes from the middle to middle, and then it has the tic-tac-toe sign as well as the diamond sign. If you're not aware of it, there are the rule of thirds being applied here and here. Okay, that's the rule of thirds, and we can use that to our advantage in art. So what I'm going to show you just quickly, so we'll go back to our landscape, and this time we're going to use the rule of thirds. Now in landscape painting, okay, we've decided, actually I'll make that a little bit lower. We have now decided that the emphasis of our painting is going to be mainly the sky. So usually when a landscape painter does that, the biggest emphasis, of course, is the clouds. All right, and usually, you know, they'll have a little bit of a sun going down and maybe a little river here, or, you know, make that look more like a sun. You know, and a mountain and a rock valley here, and that's the rule of thirds by comparison to an outdoor setting. For an indoor setting, you might think, how does that apply to indoor? Well, when it comes to an indoor setting, we do not have a sky and we don't have an earth, but we do have a wall and a floor. Now, when I'm drawing ballet dancers, I'm very aware of those two things. Do I want to show more of the floor here, or do I want to show more of the wall? Okay, it all depends on what composition I want to show. Do I want to show more of the wall, which would be also translate to sky, or earth in this case? So do I want to show more, or do I want to show less? In this case, the floor is what's showing, because that's usually where the dancers do most of their dancing. But if I want to get up close and personal to a dancer when doing a drawing, well, then I will show more of what a landscape painter uses, the sky, and less of the floor. So we'll put a ballet bar in there, you know, and we'll just put a little dancer stretching, you know, at the bar. So basically, okay, that is the rule of thirds. You can use it for an indoor purpose, or you can use it for an outdoor purpose. And that grid really helps me to keep that in check. So every time I'm using that grid, even when I'm rubbing out the grid, right? So again, times table, addition, diamond, and tic-tac-toe. What I love about this grid more than any other grid, it helps me understand that rule of thirds. So from that tic-tac-toe sign in particular, and that sign there, what I can actually do, and in this case that's the additional sign helping me there, what I can do, doesn't matter which way I turn the painting, whether I turn it this way or this way, I have those rule of thirds right there, and I can say, well, I want this much of the floor showing, or vice versa with the sky. It all depends what I want to show, and that's a great composition, and that's a great way to help use the grid. So the grid doesn't just help you to identify shape, it can also help you with those rule of thirds. I hope you enjoyed that. I can't wait to see your art. If you want to show me your art, you're more than welcome to. I really enjoy teaching this, and I hope that this grid will help you in your art journey. Be creative, have fun, see you in the next one. I know this is going to sound a little bit monotonous because I keep talking about the grid and how one shape, like a rectangle shape, landscape, whatever you want to call it, will not fit a square or a portrait shape in the grid, and cause the image to distort. But some of the best results come from sheer repetition, and it's amazing how many times people often have a tendency to forget that those two just do not fit inside each other. So when you are using a grid, make sure that the photograph will fit the same size. I know you're probably sick of me saying that, but if you could really repeat that to yourself, it'll be a huge benefit to you in the future. All right, so we come to the true and false part of the section of this YouTube video. And although this was not an art error, it was an observational error. Art or artists, we're not so much about participation, we're about observation. You know, we see the world around us, we see hue, shape, tone, value, color, all that. And that's just something that artists do on a regular basis. And I made a huge observational mistake. We all know that joke where someone says, oh, when's the baby due? And the woman says, I'm not pregnant. Well, I can top that. I was talking to a friend of mine, Jess, and Jessica has a beautiful loud laugh, and I love that. I like funny people, and we always laugh together. But one day I was talking to her, and I looked down like this, and I seen a perfect pregnant belly shape. It was a perfect pregnant belly shape. And when I seen it, it just came flying out of my mouth. I just seen this shape, and I went, oh, I said, congratulations. And as soon as I said that, I looked up and I heard Jessica gasp. She went, oh, like this, and I looked up, and there was this big man with a handlebar mustache that came down here, a shaved head, and he had how to do it yourself killing people tattoos all over his arm. He had massive biceps, and he gritted his teeth, and he looked at me, he clenched his fist, and he went, what? He goes, did you think I was pregnant? And I looked at him and I thought, oh my God, my whole life flashed before my eyes. And I thought, oh my God, because I thought I am in so much trouble. He thinks I'm having a go at him, which I wasn't. And I looked at this guy and I didn't know what to do. So the only thing that came to my mind to do was to sing and dance. I actually looked at this guy, and I'm looking up at him because he was so tall, and I went, this is what I did. This is gospel truth. I looked at him and I went, congratulations and salutations. I looked at him and I said, please don't take my sunshine away. And I was praying to God that he paid close attention to the last verse. And lo and behold, the man went into a state of shock. He had his clenched fist like this, and he looked at me and he went like this, almost like, and I think his face was a bit like, when did they let you out, kid? Because too soon was my guess. And he's looking at me, I'm looking at him, we're staring at each other for what seemed like eternity. And then out to the side, totally forgetting about poor Jessica goes, ah, 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 ah. And she laughed for a solid week, and she said, Kimberly, it was bad enough that you said to a man, congratulations, but she said, I never thought I would live to see the day that you would do a song and dance to save your life. And so yes, it is true. Singing and dancing did actually save my life. I think of all those people that, become medical nurses and doctors and things like that just to save someone's life, if they took up musical theatre, they could have done the same thing. But yes, singing and dancing saved my life. That story is true. So yeah, just word of warning to artists out there: if you see a shape, just shut up until you see the complete picture. So yeah, so that's That's basically it. See you in the next one.